One day, Rebbe, that is Rebbe Yehuda Hanassi, the editor of the Mishnah and one of the greatest rabbis to ever live, was in the academy teaching his best students. The Talmud teaches us that suddenly Rebbe Yehuda smelled garlic. Now, some people have a sensitivity to certain smells, and for Rebbe, that strong smell of garlic was just too much of a distraction. And in anger, he called out to the students. He said, "Whoever smells like garlic, please leave the study hall." Everyone looked around the room, but nobody moved. And then, to Rebbe's great surprise, his prized student, Rabbi Chia, got up and left the hall. Suddenly there was a great noise as one by one the other students got off of their chairs and followed Rabbi Chia out of the study hall. In the end, the only ones left in the hall were Rebbe himself and his son, Rabbi Shimon. The next day, Rabbi Shimon confronted Rabbi Chia. He said, "Why did you come into the Beit Midrash smelling like garlic?" Rabbi Chia explained, "God forbid I would have done that to your father. I just didn't want whoever created the offense to be embarrassed. And I knew that if I got up, everyone would follow, including the culprit, whose dignity would therefore be preserved." Good Erev Shabbos to everyone. I hope that this pre-Shabbos video finds you healthy and safe and enjoying this beautiful Erev Shabbos afternoon. We're already on the second parsha of the book of Leviticus, aptly named in the Latin for the dominant theme throughout the book, the detailed instructions involving the sacrifices made by our ancient ancestors in the Mishkan and later on in the temple. The book is not for the faint of heart, or not least for vegetarians. It describes the various types of animals and other offerings, the method of slaughter, the parts of the animals that are burnt on the altar, as well as the occasions on which these sacrifices are to be brought to the Kohanim. It's all very technical and abstruse, and on the surface it reads like a cultic how-to manual. However, the rabbis of the Talmud, for years after the destruction of the temple and the end of the sacrificial service, often read between the lines, searching beyond the pshat, that is the plain, simple understanding of the text. They searched for lessons that spoke to more universalistic values and lessons. This week's parsha, Tzav, contains a wonderful example of this. In speaking about the bringing of two specific sacrifices, the Torah reads, "God spoke to Moses, saying, 'Speak to Aaron and his sons thus, this is the ritual of the sin offering. The sin offering shall be slaughtered before Adonai at the spot, the very spot where the burnt offering is slaughtered. It is most holy.'" Two sacrifices are mentioned in the passage. The burnt offering, or the olah, is the most common sacrifice brought by the person who wants to commune with God, to get closer. The word for sacrifice itself, korban, comes from the root that means to draw close. The olah was made from cattle or sheep or goats or birds, all depending on the financial status of the petitioner, and it was completely consumed on the altar. The entire offering is given to God as an act of devotion and love. The other sacrifice is the chatat, the sin offering. The chatat was brought to the Kohanim, the priests, by someone who had sinned either intentionally or unintentionally, and it was a way of absolving oneself. What caught the eye of the rabbis of the Jerusalem Talmud was the fact that the verse states that these two sacrifices, the olah and the chatat, were offered at the same spot. The reason for this, wrote the rabbis, was that it preserved the dignity of the person bringing the chatat, or the sin offering. Locating the sin offering in the same place as the more common olah offering would allow the sinner to, quote, save face, as an observer wouldn't be able to distinguish between those bringing their sacrifice because they sinned and those simply bringing a common olah. The rabbis took very seriously the saving of face and considered it a grievous offense to embarrass someone. The Talmud teaches us that humiliating someone is tantamount to committing murder, while the Mishnah in Pirkei Avot tells us that one who embarrasses someone else forfeits credit for all of the mitzvot that he or she has done over a lifetime. You could be the greatest tzaddik, yet if you thoughtlessly embarrass someone else, you could lose all of the credit that you gained over your lifetime. Being careful not to embarrass others isn't only the moral thing to do, it's also good business management. Business writer and consultant Maya Hu Chan writes in her book, Saving Face, How to Preserve Dignity and Build Trust. She encourages her associates to become more empathetic and self-aware leaders who honor and recognize others' dignity. Face represents one's self-esteem, pride, and dignity, she writes. Losing face is caused when somebody provokes shame or gives negative feedback in a public setting, ignoring or interrupting someone, making subtle insults. Leaders, says Hu Chan, that keep the preservation of their team members' dignity and honor foremost in their minds have the most success in building lasting and productive work environments. A number of stories in the Bible point to the importance of not embarrassing others. When the biblical Sarah hears that she will bear a son in her old age, she laughs and says, "Now that I have lost the ability to have children, am I to have the enjoyment with my husband so old?" she says. In the next verse, God repeats Sarah's words to Abraham, but he leaves out the part about the old husband in order to preserve Abraham's dignity. Rabbi Joseph Telushkin, in his book, Words That Hurt, Words That Heal, suggests 3 test questions that every person should ask his or herself before criticizing someone. Number 1, does offering this critique pain me, or does it, even unconsciously, give me some pleasure? Number 2, have I included in my critique useful ideas of how the person might change? And number 3, what is my tone? Is it threatening or condescending, or is it meant to reassure and to build up? So we see, even in the midst of the most exacting details that relate to the sacrificial service not practiced for the last 2,000 years, the Torah can teach us something important about recognizing the image of God in every human being. Shabbat Shalom.